I did it. After I promised that I would pronounce your name correctly, I did it incorrectly. Ginni Rometty.
Yeah, that doesn't bother anyone but my husband. And it drives him nuts. And I said, I don't know what to tell you. It wasn't my original name. So,
have you asked if he'd considered changing it?
Well, oh, yeah, that'll go over well. No.
Ginni, thank you so much for being here, especially on a busy day. As Patty mentioned, you're reporting earnings later today, so we really do appreciate the time. One of the things that most people in this audience probably know about IBM is that it is the creator of a cognitive computing system called Watson. You may know it from the time it played on Jeopardy! Watson is named after Thomas Watson, who is an iconic CEO of IBM. But Ginni, in conversations about Watson, you describe Watson with a female pronoun. Is Watson a woman?
To be determined. Okay, so actually, this idea of cognitive, I mean, I think this is, if you think about all the trends out in the world right now, you've got the idea of social, mobile, cloud. To me, those three create a lot of big data, and at the end of the day, really what Watson came about was, I think we're all going to go through this, that there is going to be so much information in the world, you can't make sense of it. You'll no longer be able to, you can't program enough machines. You can't program enough systems. You can't do enough to make sense of it. So at the end of the day, it's going to be about, can we have another generation that can actually learn and discover out of all that information? And that's what Watson is.
So it makes sense that it would be a woman.
And you know what's funny? When some people think of it back 2 years ago when we did Jeopardy! That was one of the first things we did. But actually, over the last 2 years, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about it, I like to call it that it's been off to medical school. So Watson has been full-time on oncology and on diagnosis and treatment. So it's got what I call a high-volume personality and a high-value personality, and high value around things like medicine, and high volume around being able to help on things like advising, whether it's a financial advisor or a call center. So making progress.
Well, I'm happy to refer to Watson as a she for the rest of the conversation. But you threw around a lot of terms that I'd like to dissect for our audience. There's a lot of people in the room who are very tech savvy, but I think a lot of us are still very overwhelmed by a lot of the technological terms that are now common everyday parlance, but maybe are not things that we fully understand. So you talked about social,
mobile,
Facebook,
cloud,
Twitter, mobile, the fact that everything is on a device right now that we can carry with us, and that, you know, in all of our bags we probably have the equivalent of a supercomputer, and then cloud. And that's the notion that everything is connected and can be stored remotely and then accessed by all of our devices. With all of those things going on, how do we think about a company like IBM, which grew up in a very hardware-centric world?
Yeah, and when you go back in time, and even now, I think for all of us, this point, this may be a valuable point, and I've often said it, you know, when I think of IBM, I don't define it by a product, and I think it's one of the reasons it's 102 years old. In fact, I think for what anybody does, the idea of don't think of yourself as a product, because if you think of yourself as a product, you'll miss the trends, you'll miss the shifts, and you'll miss dangerous ones like business models. So for us, as time has gone on, as you look at the IBM company, today, 80% of it is software and services. So while go back in time where we may have started, in fact, actually started in the business, people sometimes do and don't know, started in the business of cheese slicers, time clocks, all right? So very different business than today. And then fast forward today, all around software services, and then some very, very high value infrastructure, right, that's out there. So to make that transition, that point about don't define yourself by a product, right, is more about watching what the trends are, innovating and changing with the time.
So let's talk a little bit about how a 102-year-old company continues to innovate. Because while you are a technology company, I think everybody in this room can think of a technology company that has failed because it didn't innovate, because it missed a trend. And if a technology company is missing a trend, how can the rest of us even expect to stay on top of things? How do you think about making sure that you're always looking around corners? And then how do you process that or make that into a process for a company that has 430,000 employees worldwide?
Okay, so a couple thoughts, and when I think about this conference, I always try to think about, are there any things that maybe I can leave behind that no matter what size business, maybe it's a little bit useful to you. And when this thing about looking around corners, I think no matter what size your business or what industry, I think of 5 or 6 different avenues to constantly be looking around, right? And so I think one of them, obviously, is if you do research, all right? I'll come back to this idea. You do your own kind of research. Another one is the work you do with universities around the world. I think many of us, no matter what, have access. We may have a larger access, but others can always have access into a university. The third is the kind of looking around corners you do with clients. I can't tell you how many great ideas, and certainly great ideas about acquisitions I've gotten from clients. The next is the venture capital community. So regardless if you're us or you're a startup, a very vibrant network into the venture capital community. And then the fifth kind of idea I would share with you is this idea of social, but social within the enterprise. We do our own hack days, we do our own social jams, and to your point, with 400,000 people, the ideas that people come up with internally are quite rich. So those are all very different kind of venues to go in and balance at the same time. And then this thought about how do you make sense of it, right? When you pull it all together, I would share, we have a couple different mechanisms, and again, I think it could apply no matter what your company is out here. One is, people often talk about, well, we do research and development, that's how we know. And you and I were talking about this earlier, just a brief second. I said, most people put the words research and development in one sentence, like they're one thing. And I don't think of them as one thing. I think of them as 2 different things. And the idea that research is disruptive, and I think of development as continuous innovation. And if you're able to separate and then integrate those at the right time, I think you get the best kind of innovation.
Right. And how do you personally try to make sure that you're getting new ideas? I know some of the women here that I've talked to say, I earmark 10% of my time for just, quiet time thinking, going on the internet, looking for new ideas. Is there a way that you, in your role as a person who is busy 24/7, make sure that you reserve time or create an environment where you can access those new ideas?
Yeah, I think personally, those sort of 5 avenues I just talked about, research, universities, clients, VCs, as well as my own team, the social world, I personally make time to spend in each of those, right? So I personally do. I don't just hear it secondhand. So whether it is universities, whether it's the VC community, I will be back out there in about a month. I mean, that is back out there. There's more than one VC community, by the way, in the world. So there's a lot of, I was just in Israel not too long ago with theirs. So personally make time to do that. And then I actually think, again, depends on who, we create some forums that make that happen. So I actually chair, we have a strategy team, which does strategy. Okay, I'm just checking if anyone, strategy. Technology team does technology strategy, and then an operating team that does the operations. And so I chair those, and we have those. And one other thing that's an interesting mechanism that's helped for us is we do something called a Global Technology Outlook that our research division does. And they do it every year, and they do it on future trends. Some are years and decades out, some are within a year or 2. It depends how fast, and there are many things moving fast. But then we grade them every year on how accurate they are about the future and these trends. And they've been pretty darn good, right? And it's, being accurate about a trend and then executing on a trend are always 2 different things.
So of those 5 avenues, research, university, clients, venture capital, social, do you have a favorite? Is there one that you personally enjoy engaging with the most?
I would be lying if I said there was one. Nope, all of them. I really
love
do.
All your children
I love all my children equally, absolutely. No, because you know what? I think the most important thing for any of us in our jobs is to be curious. That is, I think, perhaps one of the defining characteristics of our jobs, is to be curious. And so that's why I would say at any one point in time, maybe one is more than another, but they all bring a different vantage point.
How do you create a culture of curiosity in an organization that is as big as yours? I mean, it is a technology company. You have lots of researchers. You have lots of people who are drawn to technology, but you also have lawyers and financiers and maintenance and a huge infrastructure. How do you make IBM, this 102-year-old company, be a place of curiosity?
Yes, so this is a really good, I think, both good and interesting point. A mechanism that has, I think, worked for us is an idea about, because you always have to balance both the short and the long term and find a way to engage, as you described. You know, I've got teams of all different kinds of professions around the world. And I think one way to do this, it's been something we called, and I call, strategic beliefs, meaning, look, the world is moving fast. However, you've got to both make short-term decisions that reinforce a long-term vision of where you're going. And this idea of strategic beliefs has worked. And for us, it's 3 different views about the future. One is that there is a new era of computing. You started it by talking about that. The second is that it's going to bring technology to new buyers, in fact, to new people who don't necessarily think of technology firsthand to do their jobs. And the third is it's going to change the way you work. And then within that, you make your short-term and long-term. And the reason I bring it up is I think all of us have really smart people in our companies, and you need to give them a framework to be able to innovate on their own, make fast decisions, change, do things, but kind of with a true north about where it goes over the long term. And I think that's one of the most, it's proven to be a great vehicle. And the other thing that's proven to be, I think, a very good way to talk with a wide population has been to think really hard and be very focused on what must endure and what must change. And what must change for all of us, I think, over time is almost anything we do. And what endures is the character of your company. And this idea of your character, and I've had some really great interaction with the whole population. Again, we're using our own social technologies. Because what endures on a character is your purpose, your values, and practices, meaning like how people bring that to life. If you were looking down in a room and you saw a group of people, would you know they were from your company or not? And we just finished a big social jam over this past year with all 400,000 employees. They created, I don't know, the equivalent of 400 novels, millions of pages of information and data, and shared and wrestling over it came up with 9 practices that really represent us, that you would know it was IBM. And like us, it's already got an acronym. It's called 139. One purpose, 3 values, 9 practices. But this idea, this social engagement that everyone participated in 170 countries over a certain period of time where we worked on what it meant, and I'll give you an example of one of them. And again, there'll be more to my folks than external, but it's this idea, because how do you bring a whole population with? One of those practices is treasure wild ducks. Now, we had a long discussion about this because around the world, some people are like, we eat wild ducks, okay, over here. And we're like, no, okay, but there's a history here. You mentioned Watson, right? And there was a time in our history where he said, you'll remember there was an old story about if you tame a wild duck, if you feed a wild duck, they'll forget to fly. They'll never again, be wild again. And so the thought is you really have to treasure new ideas and embrace them and pull them in, and that's an important practice. So I think this idea of strategic beliefs and then really focusing your company on what must change, but what must endure. And the endure for us was the character of the company.
I think people who've had a chance to work with you, Ginni, know that you are somebody who doesn't leave a lot to chance. You're very prepared. You do your homework, you come ready to dive in. And yet, your company is engaged in that research part of research and development, which can be wildly risky, where you're placing bets on things that may never materialize. So I guess 2 questions. One, for you as an individual, how do you balance the responsibilities that you have as a CEO and the needs to be a responsible fiduciary guardian of the company with the obvious need to take risks and the need to go out and do things that may or may not pan out?
Yeah, I think, and again, this idea for everybody of a research and development, now some people may say, a startup or someone will sit here and say, well, wait, that's easy for you to say, you're a big company to have research. But it doesn't mean you have to own it. You can find a way to create a research engine for yourself, working with other people. So put my comments in, I think, in that context. Because we do have a research group, and it's 3,000 PhDs. It's true research. It's the largest research organization in our industry. I could be in the world of any company.
How many patents have you guys issued in the last
Well, we're the leading patent company for the last 20 years and have been by a mile. But that is just one measure, right, of your patents. And so that group gets the disruptive side. And as an example, but again, with research, when you say, how do you place your bets? I've been really careful about moving research into areas that exactly are those long-term growth initiatives for us. So cloud, smarter planet, all of our work around analytics. So today, 2/3 of research focuses in those areas. So that's one way you have a balance. You orient them, right? Another third focuses on fundamental science long-term breakthrough, right? And I think Watson, that Stephanie mentioned, is a really good example that brings it to life. Today, as I told you, it's been working on oncology, MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Cleveland Clinic, and its abilities, it's ingested 2 million pages of understands medical language, understands natural language, ability to diagnose, treat, give confidence levels, evidence. But the interesting learning, I think, between research and development is that on research, what you would do is the long-term part of this. So while I think it's just a little case study, while people, in fact, we had 4 years of researchers work on the Watson that played Jeopardy, but that stood on top of 20 years of natural language research and another 15 years of artificial intelligence. So it's this blending. And so as you go forward, by the way, research is now often working on Watson 2.0, which would be a Watson that can actually see pictures, interpret them, x-rays, everything. And 3.0 is one that can debate and reason. And so it's off on that, and development is off on commercializing short term. So that's how I keep balancing, right, so between the two.
So is anybody else in the room a little scared about all these machines that are able to learn and
it's a service.
Debate and
it's a
reason?
service.
It's a service.
It's a service. Don't be afraid. It is not. It is, and it is really truly an advisor to a decision process. And because that's a very important point on all of what we talk about. This is. There are many things the human does and the human brain does that is not imitated. And so it is a complement to how you make decisions. And there's so much evidence of really what each of us are capable of actually retaining and using at any one point in time. So you have to think of that as an assistant.
Ginni, what are the biggest surprises for you in your role as CEO and chairman? Longtime employee of IBM, rising star in the company, but then one day your job title changes. Any changes that you have felt personally as a result of this new role? Not so new, but. No, 2 years in now, but probably the one word, and I think some of us have talked about this together, the one word that comes to my mind is stewardship. Because that is, not that I didn't always think that, I think until you're actually in the position, you realize the importance, the impact. You know, when you've got both 400,000 employees, when you are in 170 countries, when you have shareholders, the impact that you are here to steward for a long term, to make a balance of the right short-term decisions and the long-term decisions. I'm the 9th CEO of IBM, and there will be others after. It's 102 years old, and that, I think, importance of that role of stewardship is the thing that, while I knew before, until you're in the position, I don't believe you actually truly internalize what that means. Something that endures.
It absolutely endures, absolutely endures.
I unfortunately am out of time. Ginni Rometty, thank you. Oh my God, did I do it right?
Yeah, you did it, yeah. My husband will be happy. Thank you so much. Thanks, Steph. Thanks, Steve.
Great.
Thank you.
Steve. Thank you, Ginni. That was a great conversation.